Hello and welcome to the Geographic Calculator webinar for the month of June. Currently, all attendees are in a listen-only mode, and you should be able to see our first slide on the screen. My name is Josie McKnight, an Application Support Specialist here at Blue Marble Geographics. I'm here with Sam Knight, and he's the Director of Product Management.
Good afternoon, everyone. So thank you for joining me today, Josie. This is Josie's first webinar with us. Today's topic is going to be the Geographic Calculator, version 2014 specifically. If you are still using 2013, there's going to be some stuff that will apply there as well. Today's focus is specifically on fine-tuning your use of workspaces. So we're not really going to be running data today itself. We're simply going to be looking at how best to streamline your use of workspaces, how to share settings between users, things like that. Whether we're looking at network-based installs or single-user-based installs, we're just going to look at some of the various ways that we can deal with the flexible nature of the workspace. To do that, we're going to be looking mostly at the tools found in the project manager and the general application preferences. Those two things used in tandem really give us the meat of what is in the workspaces and how they can be configured for different purposes. So we're going to be taking a look at importing and exporting, moving them to common locations, sharing settings between users, and all those sorts of topics today. So Josie, questions?
If you have any questions during the presentation, you can use the questions tool on the GoToWebinar panel to the right of your screen. We'll try to answer all your questions as they're submitted, and Sam will pick up any extra questions at the end of the presentation.
Okay, and as always, after the session, if you have any questions that you think of late, you don't have time to get them in during our session here today, you can always email our support team at geohelp@bluemarblegeo.com. That address is right on the bottom of the screen. And we've also got some upcoming events.
So in June, we will be in South Africa at the Africa Geo Conference. So if you're there, please stop by and say hi. Over the summer here, we'll be having a lull in conferences and events, but we'll pick up again in September. We have several training sessions scheduled at various locations around the world, so have a look at our events page and please get in touch with us if you'd like to sign up.
Okay, and there's one event in particular we want to just call a little bit of attention to with some lead time here. We will be having actually two Blue Marble user conferences in the beginning of September. We're going to have one in Calgary, Alberta, and we're going to be having another one located down in Houston at the end of October. So we do have a full conference website up about that. We are still accepting proposals for presentations. So if you are doing some interesting work involving any of our tools or the subject area, get in touch with us, and we'll see if there's a fit for you to make a presentation at our conference. You'll notice in the middle of the screen there's a web address, bluemarblegeo.com/BMUC. There's a portal there that can get you all the information you need about either the Calgary conference or the Houston conference. So give those a look, and we'll hope to see you at whichever one of those is more convenient for you in September. So today we are going to start things off with a poll, and I'm just going to bring that up here. I want to see how long you've been using the Geographic Calculator. Today we're going to be talking about using workspaces. This is generally something that's a little more on the advanced side. For those of you who are in the just getting started section there, we're going to be probably talking about some topics that can help you with your installations, how you're going to be sharing this around between users, and hopefully aiming to streamline some of your work. Those of you who are Longtime users, there's probably going to be something in here for you as well. So a little bit of something for everything in this one. I'm just going to leave that open for a few more seconds. Looks like most of you have already taken care of your voting. And just going to close that up, and let's share the results. So it looks like about 70% of us today are just getting started in the application, and the rest of the heavy contingent there in the 1 to 2 years section. So a lot of new users with us today, so that's really exciting. We've got a few there in the 10 to 19 year crowd, and that's always a very experienced crowd. We do have a very big mix of folks that have been using the software for a very long time, and a lot of folks who are just starting to get the word of it. I'm guessing that a lot of folks that are in that 10 to 19 years bracket are probably some of the folks that are doing the administration of the application. So looks like we've got some users and probably some administrators here for today's session. That's really cool. So to actually get started, just got a browser. I'm going to bring that back. We're going to talk about a little web page in a little bit later on. I'm actually starting from scratch today. You'll notice my desktop is totally blank. I don't have the calculator going here. On my desktop, I've got 2 fresh installations of the Geographic calculator and the 64-bit flavor of the application as well. I'm just going to go ahead and fire up the 64-bit version. And this is actually a completely fresh install. I just installed this morning. I'm actually working on a brand new laptop today, so I don't have any of my usual settings in place. As usual, my license manager pops up on startup, and you can see I've got a completely fresh installation of the calculator. So what we're going to be doing is the first thing we're going to take a look at is the import process. What I've done is I've packed up my workspace from my old machine, and I'm going to be bringing that over to the new machine here. And this is going to be just something that we can take a look at to use as an analogy of starting to deploy this around, some of the things that we can copy from machine to machine. So for those of you who are brand new to the application, just a very, very brief intro if there's anybody who's never actually used it before. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see a window called the Project Manager. The Project Manager is where we organize all of our individual jobs, and those are these 8 base jobs that we see there, everything from interactive conversions down through point database, seismic survey, and so on. Those are individual types of data calculations, conversions, various data manipulations like the raster mosaics and the tiling operations. They're the jumping off points for all of the project work that we're going to do in the calculator. Now, I've already been working for several years on my old laptop, and I don't want to have to recreate all of that work, so I went through an export process. We're going to take a look at that in a little bit to pack up my data, put it into a transfer file, and I'm going to bring that in on this new machine here. So to do that, I'm going to go up to the File menu, and I'm going to import a workspace. It asks you if you want to save the current workspace that you're working on. If you're going to be completely replacing it, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to go ahead and say no, I'm not going to save this because I haven't really done anything here. Now, the new workspace that I'm going to be bringing over to this machine, I've already placed on my C drive, and I have a folder where I usually keep a lot of my data. And in this folder, I've got a number of pieces of data that I usually have up in my demo workspace. And you'll see at the bottom of this, I have a few zip files. And these zip files are actually my old exported workspaces. And you'll see I've got a few there as I've modified our demonstration workspace over the years. But I'm looking to bring in my Roadshow 2014 workspace. So I'm just simply going to select that, and it's going to prompt me for where I'd like to put this on my new machine. And so I usually keep these in a common folder. The one thing I did ahead of time here was I created myself a folder called Workspaces. I keep mine right at the C level, the very base level of the machine. It doesn't really matter where this goes as long as it's a place that's easy for you to work with. So that's all I need to do. and you'll see it very quickly brings in all of my existing jobs and projects. And any of you who have attended past webinars, you're probably seeing the same familiar workspace that I use a lot in our demonstrations. I haven't really changed much in our existing workspace. I've just brought it over to a new machine. So all of this sharing that I've just done between two machines, it really only took a few clicks. We'll take a look at actually exporting one of these a little bit later. First, we're going to take a look at setting up the installation. So we've got two versions of this application on my machine. So I started out by pointing out the 32-bit version of the application and the 64-bit version of the application. Those two versions of the application are mostly in sync with each other. There's just a few key things that we don't have in the 64-bit version, namely a couple of spatial database connections. And so a lot of users that are working with modern 64-bit hardware will actually install both of these on the same machine. The licenses that we use for the application are not 64-bit or 32-bit specific. It feeds off of the same exact license. So just because I've done this in one version of the application doesn't mean it's set up in the other. So we're going to take a look at some of the folder locations, setting up some of the basic preferences, and just simply how these things are stored to help sync up your installations, because they really do behave as two completely separate installations when they're on your machine. So I am in the 64-bit, and we're going to set this one up, and then we're going to go over and take a look at the 32-bit version of the application as well. So under the Options menu, we're going to be taking a look at the Preferences dialog. And the Preferences dialog, as any other application does, there's a number of settings in here that you can use to fine-tune just about anything in the application. Things like coordinate display order, various prompts that you'll encounter when loading different types of data, your general user preferences. The one that we're going to be focusing on a lot today is the file locations. Now the file locations, if you are somebody that's using an older version of the application, prior to, say, the 2013 release, you're going to see some of these settings in a different place. You're going to find most of these settings on the General tab, actually, rather than the File Locations tab. We consolidated these, put them all in a common location back in the 2013 release, just because we were getting enough of these preference settings that it made a little more sense to consolidate them into a single place. So now the file locations is where we go to specify all the things like the default workspace that we're going to load, where your geodetic parameter database is stored, and your what we consider your preference file locations of where your default location is to go when you're opening either workspace files, raster files, or vector files that we'll see down on the bottom of this interface. So the first thing I'm going to start with is the default workspace. And that is the very top box on the file locations preferences. You'll see it's toggled on to always load, and then it has this default path here. And it goes down normally under the program data folder. That is where we install all of your user settings. This is a generic folder, so all users of your machine will feed off of the same program data folder. Down under the Blue Marble Geographics Geographic Calculator path, and you'll notice there's a little tag for the x64 version of the application. If you are working in the 32-bit version, you just simply won't see the x64. There are separate locations for each of those installations. And then finally, the bit at the end there, workspace.bmg, that is simply the default workspace that installs out of the box with the application. So the 8 jobs that we saw just a moment ago in my pre-existing workspace that had nothing loaded into them. So when I start the application, it's always going to load up that default workspace. Now, my preference is to not load that workspace. I do a lot of work in our demonstration workspace, and so I generally go to the workspace that we call the Roadshow. It's a workspace that we've put together that just simply demos all of the various types of functionality we have in the application with pre-configured jobs and things like that. So what I'm going to do is, instead of leaving this set to my default workspace, I'm simply going to browse that over to the new Roadshow 2014 workspace that I've just imported and unpacked into my Workspaces directory on my C drive. And again, that Workspaces directory is something I have just created, and that's based on my use of the application. Rather than any sort of practice. You can place your workspaces wherever you like on your machine. Some folks prefer to put them in the default location, which is in the same path as that workspace.bmg file. Other folks like to keep them in a common place on their C drive. Other folks like to keep them maybe on a shared network resource. Totally up to you and your use. So I'm going to specify that I always want to load my Roadshow workspace when I start the application. And for now, that's all I'm actually going to touch. And I'm just going to say OK on my preferences. It's going to close back out. And that's all I really have to do. That preference setting will be automatically saved when I close the application, which is what I'm going to do right now. It's going to ask me if I want to save any changes that I've done in this workspace. Simply the process of loading my workspace has loaded some data in that has special coordinate systems in it, so it's asking me if I'd like to save those changes into my data source. I'm just going to go ahead and say yes to simplify this later on. It's asking if I would like to save my workspace changes, and even though I haven't actually done anything in my workspace, the process of import does have to update some things like file paths where those paths are being stored. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and say yes, let's save those into my workspace. And now I've come back out to the main desktop with all of those changes stored in place. Now what I'm going to do is launch my Geographic Calculator 2014, the 32-bit version of the application. And again, these have totally separate installations. They have their own preferences. And so when this comes up, again, it goes back to our default workspace. So the workspace that we actually just call Workspace. So now what I want to do is, since I deal with the same data on this machine, I generally like to have these pointing to the same default. So that if I am going back and forth between 32 and 64 to use some of the spatial database connections that I need, I can just very seamlessly work in one workspace, save it, shut down, and if I need to do some spatial database work, I'll pop open the 32-bit version, get that work done, and I don't have to spend any time resetting up those workspaces. So again, here to sync these two together, I'm just going to go to Options and Preferences, and again in File Locations. And so the 32-bit version again has its own path to its own workspace. All of it is a complete parallel installation, and I'm simply going to browse to the location where I've saved my workspaces, which again I've put by choice at the base of my C drive. So I'm just going to point that to the same Roadshow workspace, and I'm going to OK that. I don't actually need to load it. I can just simply close the application if I like, and the next time I start it up, it will come back with that Roadshow workspace already configured for me. So all of those same jobs we just had over in the 64-bit version of the application. So the other bits, there are other components here that can be synced up between them. There are data source settings in the preferences there. So back on the File Locations tab, there's a whole chunk here about the data source path. I'm not going to be moving these around for now. We're just going to talk a little bit about where those things can go, and we'll take a look at the where the files actually are. So in that data source chunk, you'll see there are three listings. There are the main data source and the custom data source. Those are two different XML files. You'll see both of the names there. Geodata.xml, that is the main database of coordinate systems and all their parameters that we include with the calculator out of the box. So that is where we store all of the EPSG definitions and all of the non-EPSG definitions that we have also added to the database in there. So that's the database that we always talk about that has more than 5,000 coordinate systems in it. The second file that's listed, the custom data source, this is where all of your either proprietary or custom definitions get stored separately from the main data source. The reason those are stored in separate locations is really twofold. One is as a security feature, such that they have different levels of permissions, so users can't actually harm those files that are those parameters rather that are stored in the geodata XML, and leaving a little more flexibility with the custom XML, but also it simplifies administration of custom coordinate systems. So we're going to be talking a little bit here about network installs versus localized installs, remote administration of those. There's a number of things we can do here with the workspace. Lastly, there is the data path, and the data path is another specific folder that we include that actually goes down under the program files installation. And the data path is a collection of things like grid shift files, geoid files, or any extra what we call baggage files that are used in any particular transformations. So those would be things like, for those of you from the U.S. here, things like the NADCON grids or the U.S. geoids, the vertical shifts. Other parts of the world have maybe things like NTV2 grids or other local geoids. So the global geoid models are all stored in there. These are they can be very large files. And so for some folks, it's going to make a little bit more sense to change the locations of those for remote administration as well. So these three paths are all different locations. And we'll just take a quick look here at what is actually in these paths. So let me just quick grab on to one of these paths. I'm just going to copy it out into an Explorer window so that we can very quickly browse down there. And the folder I've just gone to here is the common settings directory that installs all of the user settings, the base workspace and such. And in this directory, down under program data, there is a folder called data source. And this is the main folder that contains everything relating to those two files, geodata and the custom XML. Now with the workspace, again, those are two separate files. You're going to see a couple extra files in there. There's geodata.xvw. That is a file that we call a view file. That is the file that makes sense of storing all of those entries that are in the custom file and the geodata file. So that is basically what takes care of all the hidden objects that administrators can shut off in the database. That takes care of all of the folder options and things like that for what the end user actually sees when they go to browse for a set of geodetic parameters. The other file that's in there, geocalc.xsd, that's just simply what's called a schema file, and we're getting a little bit more technical here than than most users probably need to. But the long and short of this is the geocalc XSD and the geodata file. Both of those go along with the geodata XML. Wherever that file is stored, both of those go along with it. The custom XML can go anywhere else you like. So what a lot of folks will do is actually split those locations. The geodata XML might remain on their local machine because it simply upgrades with the software. There's not really any need to have folks on a common version of that as long as everybody's using the same release of the software. And then the custom XML might be split off onto a common network resource. And the practical side of that in the preferences is having two different file locations for those rather than having one single data source path for both of those. The custom XML can actually be split off onto a network resource. So here at Blue Marble we have a couple of shared drives. We commonly refer to our W drive. And it's just simply a place where users can back their stuff up. We have some common software installs and things like that. Many of you, I'm sure, have your own mapped drives on your corporate networks. The custom XML can be placed out on a network drive. The geodata XML can also be placed out on a network drive. And those data paths, the grid shift files that we see in the data path, can also be located out on a network resource. And just real quick, let's take a look at what's in that data path. I'm just going to hop us over to that location. So the shift files path, again, you'll see all of these various support files that the data source feeds on. The application just simply needs to know where to go to get these files. Doesn't matter where those happen to come from. A lot of folks will also sort of consolidate these out to a network path, and you'll notice that there are a lot of files in here. I'm just going to select all of those, and you'll see there's 138 megabytes of data right out of the box. That is actually as small as this ever gets. Some of the geoid files are 50 to 100 megabytes apiece. If you're a user that is using any of the global geoid models, EGM 2008, for example, those files, there's two versions of those that are either 250 megabytes or a gigabyte in size. So instead of copying those all around to every user's machine, we keep those separate from our base installations. Instead of copying those around to every user's machine, we'll actually sometimes have folks put those into a common network location by choice. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to, but it sometimes streamlines the installation. So instead of sharing all of these massive files on everybody's machine, you simply share the location to those files and install a common workspace for several people to be feeding off of. Now the other workspace files, or rather file locations that we store in the workspace here are these three at the bottom: the workspace, raster, and vector file preferences. Now what these do is basically control the starting location of where your file open dialogues go to when you click to open a certain type of file. So we break these out into three different categories. In this case, they're going to default locations, but we can set those to different locations on your machine if you like. Now, here at Blue Marble, I have common locations that I use that are out on a network location. So for my raster files, I might change this out to a particular hard drive on our network that we keep all of our raster data in. And likewise, we have a vector database, or not a database, but a vector data server, if you will, where we store all of our repositories of common vector data. These are really just time saver settings. They don't have any significance other than simply streamlining your work when you go to open those types of data. And where those are chosen from is places like the vector data job, where you only open vector data. Places like that will feed off of the vector file preference setting. And it just simply saves you a little bit of time as you're actually working around in the workspace. So the workspaces themselves, we've been talking a little bit about sharing these workspaces. We haven't really talked about working in the workspaces, but the workspaces themselves, in terms of sharing these between users, what we can do around having something that is worthy of sharing really comes down to how we use the project manager. So the exercise we started off with here, importing this workspace from a consolidated zip file. This is something we actually do here at Blue Marble all the time. The workspace that I've loaded up here, the workspace that we just simply call our roadshow, is a workspace that we use throughout our sales team and our tech support team for demonstration purposes. So we have a little bit of everything in some of these different project folders, and we've organized them into projects so that when we load up the calculator, we can very quickly get to exactly what we're looking for. A lot of folks that are new to the application will very commonly say, well, why don't I have all of these other folders that you have with these specialized capabilities? am I working in a limited version of the software or something? And the answer to that is no, no. What you have when you start with your default workspace is these first 8 jobs that we have in the top project there. And these are just simply blank starting places. We can create as many new projects or a project is simply a folder of jobs, as many new jobs themselves individually as you like. And so if you just simply right-click anywhere there in the project manager, you'll see some options to create a new project or create a new job or to create a new batch of particular jobs. Now, what I've done for all of these existing jobs that I have in there these are all variations of those simple 8 base types of work that can be done. So you'll notice some of the common icons that you'll see associated with each one of those. So down in these other folders, all I've done down there is simply right-clicked and I said create a new project. And we can simply click on those and give those whatever kind of name you like. So I'm just creating Sam's folder down there. If I want to create, say I was doing some work here in Maine where we're located, if I wanted to set up a project folder full of jobs that were all predefined with common Maine coordinate systems or something like that. In the folder that I create, maybe I would create a new interactive calculator. And you'd simply see that pop in there with a default name. I can right-click on that. I can rename it. And let's just say, for example, I wanted to set up a conversion here from WGS 84 latitude longitude to our common UTM zone here to UTM zone 19, or one of our state plane coordinate systems, say the Maine West zone. We could give that calculator whatever name we like. So a lot of folks might do something like call that UTM 19 North to WGS 84, whatever the particular conversion that you're going to be doing is. Or some folks will set those up based on particular projects that you're actually working on the ground, the name of those. So totally flexible naming in there. These are just instances of these 8 base types up there. So in my interactive calculator here, when we create those new calculators, it's simply going to start off with our default settings. And if I wanted to set up a conversion here from UTM 19 North to WGS 84 as a template, all I would need to do would be to set up my conversion. So I would browse down through our categories of coordinate systems, just like you would for any particular type of work, and find the system we're looking for and put that in place. Now, if I wanted to simply save this as a template, all I need to do is say File and either Save or Save As, depending on if you want to create something new for your workspace. And I could say, let's save the workspace. If I want to save everything that I've done, I could simply save out just the job if I wanted to, just the project. But if I say Save Workspace, it's going to save everything I've been working on. And I now have this new template job in my workspace. And because I have set this workspace up as a common workspace between here in the 32-bit version of the application and over in the 64-bit version of the application, if I save that workspace as I just did, close out of my 32-bit version and hop over to the 64-bit version, again, if I was going to be swapping back and forth between doing some of those spatial database functions that aren't in both places, I can hop right back and forth, and we see all of that work is predefined as a template in the other side. Now, some of the things that we might do with templates, such as predefined settings like I just created here, you can either set those up as blank templates. Those are very useful if you are, say, an administrator, or if you are somebody who is sort of your go-to geodetics person within your group. You can create templates like this and give them to your other users. You can share them either by sharing a common workspace or simply by giving them a single job file. That was some of the other save options that we have up there. You can save as an individual job, and then just give that person one individual thing that they can import back into their workspace. So you don't even have to have a completely common workspace in order to be able to go back and forth. Other things that are commonly done with templates is if you save particular jobs that you've already worked on, and in this case I've got some of my jobs here that have data predefined in them. If I want to save a particular common conversion that I'm doing that might rely on particular settings, all we would need to do for the jobs that are batchable is right-click on those particular jobs, and you'll see options to batch add. And that allows you to very quickly use a template that you've set up to spawn those settings off onto a whole group of other files. So when we batch add, it will ask you for all of the rest of the files you wish to run in that group. And all of the settings will inherit from the base job. So you'll see a lot of the settings here are actually grayed out because they're already set simply by the fact that I'm using this as a template. This allows you to come back to a workspace over and over if you have a lot of, say, repetitive data tasks where you maybe get updated versions of a certain piece of data that needs to have some coordinate calculation work done on it. You can reload that workspace, go right to your saved template, and simply start a batch off of that. Or if it's maybe just one file, you just simply swap out the data itself if you've already got all of your coordinate system settings stored in place. Now the process for actually sharing these workspaces, there's a couple of ways to do this depending on the nature of the share you want to make. The most common way that a lot of folks do this is to export a workspace and then import the workspace. And the import that I'm talking about is the very first thing we did here. So I went up to the File menu and I imported a workspace from a zip file that I had copied over from another machine. Now, some of the caveats that you're going to run into with some of these things. So the workspace that I have here, you'll notice it's full of data. So I already have data loaded. These are pointing to particular file locations. Now, this process does actually take the data with it, or rather, excuse me, it takes the path to the data with it. So the workspace knows all of the file locations that your data is pointing to. For those of you that are working purely on a network environment, it's sometimes a little bit easier to do this. If you are sharing your data, if you're getting your data from either a shared path or a mapped network drive, and all of your users have access to those same relative places. For the process that I did here, I'm actually using completely local data. And the reason we use local data for this workspace is because for my team, the group of people that are using this workspace for demo purposes or tech support, handling things like that, we all need to have these available offline. For instance, I'm on a laptop right here. I am plugged into the internet, but I unplug this, go to a conference, and I need to be able to have that data loaded right there for me. With a little bit of planning ahead of time, you can very easily consolidate your data into common locations. So the path that I have right here is a folder that I've already stored my data in. So I got our zip file from this location, and you'll see I've got a bunch of folders already in place. Now this data, when I share this particular workspace, I have to share more than just that zip file. If you're actually relying on the data to be along with those jobs, if you're not just sharing blank templates, you actually do need to share the rest of the data with it. And you'll see I've got things like collections of LiDAR files or collections of CAD drawings, things like that. And those do need to be in the same relative place on each machine. So for my use, what we do is we place this into a folder that we simply call BMG Demo Data. We place that down low on the C drive of the local machine. We copy one directory over So the data that contains all of the spatial data itself, as well as our exported workspace. We share that between users. They very quickly import it. We don't need any common network resources together, and that works very well as a completely offline sharing method. I can put all of this stuff onto, say, a thumb drive, pack it up onto another machine, and we import it just like we did as we started the hour here. The last little piece of that, to actually create these zip files, what we need to do under the File menu is choose Export Workspace. This is the only process that we have to do to pack this up. When we choose to export a workspace, it's going to ask you to name a zip file and save it to a particular location. If I wanted to, I'll just save this out to my desktop so we can see what this looks like. I'm just going to call it Sam's Workspace. And when I save that, just going to think about it for a second, pack up all of those settings. There are a lot of things to do, and then on the desktop you're going to see my zip file. You can save that anywhere you like. A lot of folks will put those out on a shared network location, and that's actually what I do here to move this around between folks. I put this out on our backup drive, and I point my other users to it. I say, go ahead, grab that workspace, import it, and just make sure you've copied over our common data location. So that's one way of sharing these things. The other way of sharing this is if you're going to set this up and place it onto a common network resource. That takes a little bit more thought because you've got to actually save your workspace out to that location. The reason you need to do that is so that it maintains all of the file paths, it cleans up everything in the workspace, because there are a lot of moving pieces in a workspace. For that type of process, the best way to go about it is to say, work on a local machine. You get your jobs and your project set up. You say save as. We're going to save the whole workspace, and then you can go out to your network locations, or if you have mapped network drives. In this case, we have some mapped network drives. Or if you're just simply going to browse by machine name, you can save those out to your common location, and then another user only needs to open that workspace from that same location. So it's a simpler even for importing. It just takes that extra step of saving the whole workspace out to your common location. And again, just like when we're syncing the two versions of the application together, under the Options menu and Preferences, it all comes down to that File Locations path. We'll simply need to point that workspace setting to the common location on your network, and if you wish, we also move around those data source paths. There's sometimes a little more thought that needs to go into putting the data source resources out on the network, simply for file permissions and things like that. But if you're looking at any kind of a complicated installation like that, and you're wanting to know what the best ways to go about that is, sometimes a quick exchange with our support group can point you at some best practices for that. I think that's about what I'm gonna wrap it up with here, and we'll open this up and take some questions. Let's see, Jasmine. Excuse me, Josie. Are you still with me?
Yes, I'm here, Sam. Thank you for sharing all that information with us, and we do have a few outstanding questions. The first one is, what limitations are there around using network-based workspaces?
Okay, that's a great question. So network-based workspaces, we've just been talking about these a little bit here. If you are going to be placing your workspaces out on the network, there are some practical considerations. Mostly, folks that are putting these on the network are using very, very blank workspaces, if you will. They will have some basic coordinate system settings already in place, and they might have some view settings already in place. Now, the view settings are simply how you interact with the database, and the job templates themselves are completely shared. So if I were, let's say for example, I was calling this workspace from a network location, and I was sharing this with all of my other team members here, we would all see exactly the same data, all exactly the same settings, because we are starting from exactly the same file as the workspace. So the major repercussions there are you are dealing with shared resources. If, for example, I made a change to the workspace, and I've actually got kind of a funny example of that right here in this workspace. There is a blank interactive conversion here that somebody else put in place on our shared copy, and it's now in the one I just imported. So it is actually blank. It doesn't really hurt anything, but I can see somebody else was messing around with our shared workspace. So when I go to open that up here, I just happened to notice that at the bottom of my list. I'm seeing exactly what the last person saved. It is possible for two people to be working with the workspace at the same time. If they're both saving stuff back to that, one of them is going to be overwriting the other. So when you're working with completely shared network resources, it comes down to the file access issues. Very, very often, if you're going to move into that completely network shared type environment, there are some things that are controlled outside of the calculator. Simple file reading permissions, that kind of thing. Very often it can be a good idea, if you want your folks to be going completely off of these as templates, is to simply lock down the directory where you've put the workspace out on the network. If you don't lock down that directory, you can get into it with some folks overwriting the work that's been done by somebody else, those types of issues. Those really are the major issues with moving those out onto a shared network resource. The one last little thing is the load time. If you are working at a particularly large spread out company, so you have shared resources that might be coming halfway around the planet, getting things like the grid shift files from a common location can be a little bit slower. Just simple file access speed issues, the network latency, that kind of stuff. But the main concern there is overwriting a common network location. So if you're going to put them out on a shared folder, it's usually a good idea to put a read-only setting on that for most of your folks. That doesn't stop them from having the ability to go local if they need to save other job settings that are not going to be common, but it does simply get into the file access type of stuff. So I hope I answered that question. Do we have any other questions there, Josie?
Yes, we do. The next one is it better to use locally saved workspaces or network workspaces for using the admin tools?
For the admin tools, that can be kind of a complex question. I'm not really sure I have a best way to do that, because it depends a lot on the specifics of each company. I'll talk about what I've noticed that we've seen with a lot of our users. A lot of users tend to like installing custom workspaces locally on the machine. So they'll put in place all of the various admin locks, all of the control on the view settings, all of the various templates that you might have, but then still allow the user a fairly high degree of freedom to work within those bounds. Because the admin controls are password protectable, it is possible to completely lock those down on the end user's machine and keep them working within your bounds. But we have sort of found that most folks like to keep those shared admin type settings copied to each machine, and what a lot of folks are doing through the assistance of like scripted installs and things like that is actually to script usually your IT group might do something like that, would be to script what's called a configuration script. And that is a script that you would run after installing the software that would install a common set of tools, if you will, a workspace, various jobs, the various admin settings on that user's machine, just so that folks are not doing things like overriding each other's user settings, but allowing them to work within the confines of their own machine. But there's not necessarily a best answer to that. And what I usually suggest when folks start asking sort of more specifics like that is it's a very good idea to give our tech support group a call or send in an email and tell us a little bit more about the specifics exactly of the types of sharing you're looking to do, the types of admin locks you're looking to put in place, because we can give you a sort of a much better idea of how to best go about the specifics, because everybody's network setup is just a little bit different. Let's see here. I'm just going to scan down through our questions list, see if there's any others that have come in. Looks like we just had a couple others come in that I'd like to take a look at. I mentioned before that the default geodata.xml file only gets updated as new software is released. And the question is, does it not get updated when we import new objects from the EPSG in the data source menu? The answer to that is actually no. The geodata XML file is not updated when you import from the EPSG. Those imports are stored in the custom XML. So those are handled as custom objects. Every 6 months, typically spring and fall, we do a major update along with the official releases from EPSG, and at that time those entities are added into the new geodata XML file. But that's done by us here at Blue Marble, and those are rolled out into new versions of the software. When you as the end user actually import those go into the custom XML file, and they're treated as custom definitions. We are looking at a more graceful way of doing that in the future that allows those to merge in together, such that after you've imported something, when there is a matching object in the stock version of the geodata XML file, that those two will reconcile with each other, or a mechanism to actually put them directly in geodata XML. But that is ongoing, and we have not actually released those tools yet. And a follow-up question there saying, I want to roll out a network install with custom view settings to limit all users to what geodetic parameters they can see, but I want them to be able to each have their own workspaces locally. Is this possible? That is very, very possible. That is a little bit what I was starting to talk about with one of the previous questions. You can establish custom view settings. The custom view settings, if you want to have folks completely with their local workspaces on their own machines, you can actually fully customize that. Each user can have their own local workspace with completely custom view settings. It's much more common for either groups of users or everybody to share a common restricted view. In that mode, typically if you're going to be working off of a fully local workspace, the smoothest thing to do is to set up one machine completely as you would like it to be behaving, with all of your custom view settings. If you're working with proprietary definitions at the same time, to set those all up on one common machine, and then either use the export workspace to share the zip file across different users, or to set up what I was starting to talk a little bit about, a configuration script that you can run either at install or during a scripted install if you're doing that kind of a rollout, and that will copy down your customized view settings in everybody's local workspace. So it's definitely possible. If you've got any more specific questions, probably be a good idea to touch base with our tech support team. And again, you can talk to them at geohelp@bluemarblegeo.com. and just give us a little more of the specifics, maybe about how exactly you're looking to roll that out, and we can set you on the right path for that kind of a rollout. I think that is about it for questions at this time. So I'm just going to wrap up our session here. I'd like to say thank you to everyone for tuning in today. Thank you, Josie, for helping me out. Any follow-up questions, please feel free to send an email into our tech support team. Again, check out our events page on our website. If you're looking for training opportunities, we do have a number of them scheduled in various locations around the fall. And if you're a Global Mapper user, or if you're curious about Global Mapper, our next session in a couple of weeks is What's New in Global Mapper 15.2. We did just release a new update to Global Mapper. A lot of very exciting new features there, and my colleague David McKittrick will be leading that session to introduce the new version there. So thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time.